I never thought I would write something like this. Here I am, pouring out my heart in the hopes that anyone might relate to my story. My name is Mike, and I was married to Sarah for 6 years. We had what I thought was a perfect marriage. We laughed together, traveled together, and shared dreams. But like many things that seem perfect on the surface, there were cracks hiding beneath. It all started a few months ago. Sarah had been acting differently. She'd come home later than usual, her excuses becoming more elaborate. Work meetings, she'd say, or I was out with friends. But the changes in her behavior ran deeper than just her late nights. She started dressing more provocatively. Her phone became her new best friend, and she was always on it, even when we were together. I felt a nagging sense of unease, a whisper in the back of my mind that something was off. One evening, I was tidying up our living room when I found her phone on the coffee table. Normally, I wouldn't go through her things, but my gut was screaming at me. I picked it up and looked. At the screen, there was a message notification from someone named Jake. I opened it, not sure what I was expecting to find. It was a flirty message, something about meeting up for a drink and how he couldn't stop thinking about her. My heart sank. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I confronted her about it that night. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to hear her deny it, but instead I was met with a barrage of excuses. She played it off like it was nothing, just a harmless friendship. Mike, you're being paranoid. Jake is just a friend. You know how I am. I'm friendly with everyone. I wanted to scream. My heart raced and anger coursed through my veins. I demanded to know who he was, but she deflected every question. I had to know more, so I did what any distraught husband would do. I started digging. I found out that Jake wasn't just a friend. He was the captain of the cruise ship Sarah had been raving about for months. She had always dreamed of going on a luxurious cruise, and somehow I had been fooled into thinking it was just a fun aspiration. Turns out she had more than just aspirations with that captain. Days turned into weeks, and I was a man on a mission. I began to track her movements more closely. It felt like I was a detective, piecing together a puzzle that made me sick to my stomach. I watched her lie, her laughter felt tainted, and every time she left the house, I felt a mix of anger and betrayal. I had to confront her again. The next time I saw her texting Jake, I snapped. "Are you having an affair with this captain?" I yelled. Her reaction was one I wouldn't forget. She laughed, an almost mocking laugh, and then turned serious. "You really think I would cheat on you? You're being ridiculous." She threw the accusation right back at me, claiming I was paranoid and controlling. It was infuriating. I felt like I was losing my mind. Through all this, I wrestled with a whirlwind of emotions, rage, sadness, and a sense of betrayal I had never known. I was a man who felt utterly helpless in the face of his wife's dishonesty. I kept asking myself, how could she do this to me? How could she so easily lie to my face? And what was I supposed to do with this pain? As the days passed, I made a decision. I was going to take control of my life. I wasn't going to be a victim in this situation. I started formulating a plan, one that would not only address Sarah's betrayal but also punish the man who had taken advantage of my trust. I wanted revenge on Jake, the captain who had charmed my wife while I was left in the dark. I thought about how easy it would be to ruin his career, to make sure he would never be in a position to flirt with another married woman again. I was filled with determination. I had been pushed to the edge, and now I was ready to act. I wasn't sure how it would all unfold, but I knew one thing. Sarah's travel dreams were going to be shattered along with my trust. I was going to make sure she never stepped foot on a luxury ship again. I took a deep breath, preparing for the next phase of my plan. The storm was coming, and I was ready to unleash it. I began by gathering information on Jake. It felt like I was in a movie, plotting my revenge against the villain. I spent hours on the internet searching for anything that could help me. He had a social media presence which made it easier to learn about his life. He posted pictures of himself on the cruise ship, smiling with guests, and to my dismay, there were even a few photos with Sarah in them. They were innocent enough, her posing with a group of people, his arm casually draped over her shoulder. But to me, it was a knife to the heart. I discovered that Jake worked for a well-known cruise line, one that prided itself on luxury experiences and impeccable service. I learned about the cruise ship he captained, which was due to set sail in just a few weeks. The thought of Sarah being on that ship with him was unbearable. I felt a mix of rage and desperation. I needed to act before she had the chance to book a trip or, worse, sail away with him. One day, after another unconvincing excuse from Sarah about a work conference that required her to stay late, I decided to pay a visit to the cruise line's offices. I figured if I could find a way to get in touch with someone higher up, I could expose Jake for what he truly was, a predator hiding behind a captain's uniform. I arrived at the cruise line's office, my stomach twisted with anxiety and determination. I spoke with a receptionist, trying to act casual while asking for information about the ships and crew. She was friendly enough but didn't hand out any confidential details. However, luck was on my side when I noticed a bulletin board filled with notices about crew members and upcoming schedules. I took a picture of Jake's information from the board. It included his position, the ship he captained, and even a few personal details about his career. It was a goldmine. That night, I did some digging and found the name of the cruise line's HR director. I spent hours crafting an email. I was careful, methodical, making sure to include all the details of Jake's unprofessional behavior. I mentioned his affair with a married woman, how he was using his position to take advantage of vulnerable women looking for a little adventure. I felt a sense of control as I clicked send. I didn't stop there. I looked up reviews of the cruise line and began to gather testimonials from other passengers who had similar experiences with Jake. It felt like a full-time job, but with each piece of evidence I collected, my confidence grew. I was on a mission, and nothing was going to stop me. In the meantime, my home life became a strange mix of tension and denial. Sarah continued to act as if everything was normal. She still went out with her friends, still laughed at my jokes, still tried to maintain our routine. I became a master of concealment, pretending to be the oblivious husband while secretly plotting my revenge. I felt like an actor in a play, performing a role while my real emotions churned just beneath the surface. It was during one of Sarah's late nights out that I received an unexpected phone call. It was from the HR director of the cruise line. My heart raced. They had received my email and wanted to discuss the allegations I raised about Jake. I did my best to sound composed as I explained everything I had learned. The director listened intently, and I could tell I piqued their interest. They mentioned that this was serious and that they would investigate further. After I hung up, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was doing it. I was actually taking action. But with that excitement came an underlying fear. What if I went too far? The thought of ruining someone's career, even if he deserved it, weighed heavy on my conscience. But then I thought about Sarah's betrayal, the lies she fed me every day, the way she flaunted her friendship with Jake. No, I couldn't back down now. A few days later, I received another call from the cruise line. They informed me that Jake had been summoned for a disciplinary meeting due to my allegations. I felt a surge of satisfaction wash over me. The idea of him sweating in front of his superiors, being questioned about his actions, was exhilarating. But I also felt a pang of guilt. Was I really going to ruin this man's life? Did he deserve it? Yet, every time I thought about Sarah's laughter when she denied the affair, I pushed those doubts aside. I did want to hurt anyone, but I had to protect myself. I had to make sure she realized the consequences of her actions. As the day of the disciplinary meeting approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Part of me wanted to confront Jake directly, to look him in the eye and tell him exactly how he had betrayed me. But I knew that was risky. I had to remain in the shadows, orchestrating everything like a puppet master. I kept reminding myself of my ultimate goal, to ensure that Sarah never set foot on a luxury cruise ship again. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, to understand the depth of her betrayal. I was prepared to see this through to the end, no matter where it led me. And I knew that soon, the storm would finally break. The day of Jake's disciplinary meeting arrived, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of anxiety that clung to me like a second skin. I spent the morning pacing around the house, rehearsing what I would say if the opportunity presented itself. Would I confront him? Would I let him know who I was? The Thought of it sent chills down my spine. I was a man on the edge, fueled by anger and heartbreak. I had no way of knowing how the meeting would unfold, but I could only hope it would be a turning point, not just for Jake but for Sarah too. I wanted her to confront the reality of what she'd done and see the consequences of her actions, even if it meant shaking the very foundation of our marriage. That afternoon, I received a text from the HR director. They wanted to inform me that Jake had been suspended pending further investigation. My heart raced with a mix of triumph and guilt. I was relieved that my efforts paid off, but I couldn't help but wonder about the fallout. Would this drive Sarah and Jake closer together? Would she leave me for him once she found out he was in trouble? When Sarah came home that evening, she was in a surprisingly good mood. She didn't mention anything about her late nights or the conversations we'd had. Instead, she excitedly shared that she had booked a weekend trip with her friends to a local resort. It felt like a gut punch. As she talked, I could barely focus on her words. All I could think about was how her carefree attitude felt like a slap in the face. Did she really have no idea what was happening behind the scenes? Sounds fun, I replied, forcing a smile. Inside, I was boiling. Could she truly be so oblivious, or was she pretending? I wanted to scream, to tell her everything, but I knew I had to play my cards right. This was all part of the plan. Later that night, after I had pretended to be supportive while she packed for her trip, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Sarah, can we talk?" I asked, my heart pounding. She looked up, surprised, but nodded. We sat on the couch, and for a moment everything felt heavy with unspoken words. "Listen, I know you're excited about this trip, but can we talk about everything?" I ventured cautiously. I needed to gauge her response to see if she would come clean. "Everything? What do you mean?" she asked, feigning innocence. "Jake," I said, watching her closely. Her expression shifted, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw panic in her eyes. "I know about him, Sarah. I know you've been seeing him." She froze, and for a split second I thought she might confess, but then she recovered, her defenses going up. "Mike, that's ridiculous. I told you he's just a friend. You're being paranoid again," she exclaimed, her voice rising defensively. I could feel my anger bubbling over. "A friend? Is that what you call it? You've been lying to my face, and you think I'm just going to let it slide?" I was yelling now, unable to contain my emotions. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me." She shot back, her facade cracking just enough for me to see an inch of vulnerability, but I pushed forward, desperate to make her understand the weight of her choices. "I caught you texting him, Sarah. I saw the messages. You can't deny it," I said, my voice steadier now. "And now he's facing consequences for what he's done. This isn't just about the two of you anymore." Her expression shifted from anger to confusion, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. "Wait, what do you mean? What did you do?" I paused for a moment, relishing the surprise on her face. "Let's just say I made sure Jake won't be bothering you or anyone else anytime soon." The satisfaction I felt was bittersweet, but in that moment I needed her to realize the gravity of her betrayal. Her eyes widened. "You did what?" There was a tremor in her voice, and I could tell she was beginning to grasp that I had taken action. "Let's just say I reached out to his boss. He's been suspended, Sarah. He won't be on that cruise you've been dreaming about. You can thank him for that," I stated flatly. There was a beat of silence where it felt like the air was thick with tension. Sarah's face contorted into a mix of anger and disbelief. "How could you do that? You don't know what you're ruining." "That's just it, Sarah. You don't know what you're ruining either," I shot back. "You think you can just lie to me and get away with it. You think you can play with people's lives without consequences." Her anger boiled over, and she started yelling, throwing accusations my way. "You're controlling, you're ruining everything. How could you do this to me?" I felt the weight of her words, and for a brief moment I doubted myself. But then I remembered why I was doing this. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about standing up for myself. "No, Sarah, I'm holding you accountable. You've betrayed me, and I'm not going to let you walk away from this without acknowledging the pain you've caused." As the argument reached a boiling point, I realized that our marriage was hanging by a thread. The love I once felt was now overshadowed by betrayal and resentment. And as Sarah stormed off to our bedroom, I knew I was nearing a breaking point. The next day, while she was away on that trip with her friends, I made a decision. I wouldn't just sit back and be the victim anymore. I was going to take my power back. I was going to ensure that Sarah understood the consequences of her actions, even if it meant destroying the remnants of what was once our life together. I needed to solidify my plan. As I sat in the empty living room, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was done being the nice guy. It was time to embrace the storm I had created and see it through to the end. The days ahead would be challenging, but I was ready. I was going to make sure that she would never forget the choices she had made, and when it was all said and done, she would understand the cost of her betrayal. I spent the next few days in a strange haze, caught between the relief of knowing Jake was suspended and the dread of what lay ahead for Sarah and me. Her weekend trip with her friends was supposed to give me time to think, but instead, I felt more lost than ever. I couldn't shake the feeling that even with Jake out of the picture, our marriage was crumbling before my eyes. That Sunday afternoon, I decided to take a drive to clear my head. I found myself driving aimlessly, the scenery outside blurring as my thoughts spiraled. I kept replaying Sarah's words in my mind, her anger, her accusations, her refusal to see the truth. I felt like I was in a storm, tossed around by waves of doubt and anger. Why couldn't she just admit what she had done? Why was she so insistent on defending Jake, the man who had tried to steal her away from me? As I drove, my phone buzzed with notifications. I ignored them at first, but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over and checked my messages. It was a text from my close friend, Tom. He had heard about the situation and wanted to check in on me. I could tell he was genuinely concerned. "Hey man, just checking in. Heard things are rough, want to talk." I hesitated before replying. Part of me wanted to keep everything bottled up, but another part of me craved support. I typed out a quick response asking if he could meet me for coffee. When we met an hour later, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders as I opened up to him. I told him everything, the late nights, the texts, my discovery of Jake, and how I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. Tom listened intently, offering his perspective without judgment. "Dude, it sounds like you've been through hell. You have every right to feel betrayed, but what do you want to do now?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "I want her to understand. I want her to feel the consequences of her choices. I don't want to be the one left standing here while she plays the victim," I confessed, my voice shaking slightly. "What if you gave her a taste of her own medicine?" Tom suggested, raising an eyebrow. "I mean, if she wants to live this fantasy life, why not show her what it really costs?" The idea struck me like lightning. It was as if a light bulb had gone off in my head. I had been thinking about my anger and Jake, but I hadn't really focused on Sarah's perceived freedom and her enjoyment of the situation. Tom was right. Maybe it was time to turn the tables. If she wanted to live in a fantasy world, I could create one of my own. I spent the next few days preparing for the final stage of my plan. I wanted to ensure that Sarah would truly understand what she had lost. I reached out to a few friends who worked in the hospitality industry and quickly learned about some opportunities for weekend getaways and experiences that I could exploit. I wanted to show Sarah that I could also have fun and that I could live without her. Using the cruise line's website, I booked a weekend cruise for myself. It felt like a bold move, and I was both excited and terrified. I wanted to enjoy myself, but more than that, I wanted to show Sarah that life could go on without her. I needed her to feel the sting of jealousy, the realization that she had lost someone who could have made her happy without the lies and deceit. The day I left for the cruise, I felt a mix of exhilaration and nervousness. I packed my bags, making sure to dress well. This wasn't just a getaway, it was a message. I wanted to enjoy myself and show Sarah that I didn't need her to find happiness. As I boarded the ship, I took a deep breath, feeling the excitement of the unknown wash over me. I was surrounded by couples, families, and groups of friends, all enjoying their time together. I tucked my phone away, determined to disconnect from my old life for a while. The ship was gorgeous, with luxurious amenities and endless activities. I wandered the decks, soaking up the sun and the atmosphere. As the day went on, I found myself mingling with other passengers. There were numerous conversations, some light-hearted, others deeper. I was surprised by how quickly I fell into easy banter with strangers. It felt good to reconnect with people, to share laughter and stories without the weight of betrayal hanging over my head. I met a woman named Lisa at one of the bars. She was vibrant, full of life, and had a contagious laugh. We struck up a conversation that flowed effortlessly. I found myself forgetting about the pain Sarah had caused, even if just for a moment. Lisa was in a similar situation. She had recently come out of a relationship that had left her feeling lost. We bonded over our stories, and as the night wore on, it felt like we had formed an unbreakable connection. As we danced under the stars, I felt a thrill I hadn't experienced in a long time. I was reminded that there was life beyond my heartbreak, that I could still find joy even in the aftermath of betrayal. It was liberating to be in a place where I could just be myself, free of the lies that had tainted my marriage. But as the night came to an end, I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. Was I moving on too fast? Was I just trying to drown my sorrows in someone new? I didn't want to hurt anyone, least of all Lisa, who seemed genuinely kind and fun-loving. I reminded myself that my ultimate goal was to make Sarah feel the weight of her actions, not to replace her. While I enjoyed my time on the cruise, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long journey. I wanted Sarah to know that she had lost something special, that she had thrown away a love that could have brought us both happiness. As I returned home, I was determined to confront her once again. This time, I would be different. I wouldn't just be a victim. I would be a man who had taken control of his life, who was ready to embrace whatever came next. Whether that meant rebuilding our marriage or letting her go completely, I knew I had the strength to face it. I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. I would make sure she understood that I was no longer the man she could take for granted. This was my life, and I was ready to reclaim it no matter the cost. When I returned home from the cruise, I felt like a different person, stronger, more self-assured. I had spent an entire weekend rediscovering myself, free from the confines of my troubled marriage. I had enjoyed laughter, connection, and a taste of what life could be without the shadows of betrayal looming over me. But now I had to face the reality back at home. Sarah was back from her trip too, and the moment I stepped through the door, I could tell she sensed a change in me. I was no longer the passive husband who would accept her excuses without question. I had seen what life could offer outside of our troubled relationship, and I was not going to let her dismiss my feelings anymore. "Hey, you're home early," she exclaimed, her voice cheerful as she walked into the living room. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the love we used to share, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. "Yeah, the cruise was great," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. I didn't want to show too much enthusiasm. I needed her to realize that I had moved on in many ways. "Oh, I wish I could have joined you. Did you meet anyone interesting?" she asked, a hint of envy creeping into her voice. "Actually, I did," I said, looking directly into her eyes. I could see the gears turning in her mind as she processed my words. "Her name is Lisa. We hit it off." I watched as her expression changed from curiosity to something darker. "Lisa, who is she?" "A friend from the cruise." There was an edge to her voice, and I could feel her tension radiating through the air. "Yes, she is. We shared a lot of laughs and got to know each other. It was refreshing," I said, letting my words hang in the air. I wanted her to feel the sting of jealousy, a taste of the emotions I had experienced when I found out about her infidelity. Sarah's face flushed with anger. "So you're just going to replace me just like that?" Her arms crossed defensively over her chest, her eyes narrowing. "Replace you?" I echoed, trying to maintain my composure. "This isn't about replacing you, Sarah. This is about me taking control of my life after you betrayed my trust. You think you can lie to me and act like everything is fine. You've been seeing Jake behind my back, and I've had enough." Her expression shifted again, morphing into one of indignation. "I told you it was nothing. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Why are you being so dramatic?" "Dramatic?" I scoffed, incredulous. "You don't get to gaslight me anymore. I've seen what lying does to a relationship, and I won't stand for it. You want to pretend like it never happened, but I can't just forget. I deserve better, and I won't settle for half-truths." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. This confrontation was crucial. I needed her to understand the gravity of her actions, to feel the impact of her betrayal fully. I've been thinking a lot while you were away. I want you to know that I won't be your safety net anymore. I'm not going to just sit here and allow you to continue with your lies. She opened her mouth to respond, but I interrupted her with a raised hand. No, let me finish. You think everything will remain the same, that we can just go back to how things were, but I'm telling you now, things have changed. I can't just go back to being the Mike who lets you walk all over him. Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of regret. What are you saying, Mike? Are you leaving me? I hesitated, weighing my words carefully. I'm not sure yet, but you need to understand that trust is a fragile thing. It's going to take a lot of work for me to even consider rebuilding anything between us. As the reality of those words sank in, I saw her eyes begin to water. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was lonely, she admitted, her voice shaking. He made me feel alive again. Alive or just wanted. I replied, refusing to let her excuses keep me from my resolve. You have a choice, Sarah. You need to decide what you want. If you want to repair our marriage, you're going to have to prove it to me. This isn't just going to blow over. Her lips trembled as she tried to find the right words. I'll do anything, Mike. I'm so sorry. I didn't think about what it would do to you. Sorry isn't enough. You need to show me you mean it. You need to stop communicating with Jake and cut ties completely. I want you to acknowledge the damage this has done, not just to me but to us. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'll do it, I promise, just don't leave me. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, anger, sadness, but beneath it all there was a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this could be the turning point we needed, but I was still cautious. I needed to see genuine change from her. I don't want to walk away from everything we built, but I won't be a fool either. Trust takes time to rebuild, and I'm willing to try, but it's going to be a long road, I said, my voice softening slightly. Thank you for giving me a chance, she whispered. As she moved closer, I felt the weight of our conversation settle around us. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a while, I felt like we were on the same page. I wanted to believe we could work through this. In the days that followed, Sarah made genuine efforts to show that she was committed to repairing our marriage. She cut off all communication with Jake, even going so far as to block him on social media. I could see the remorse in her eyes as she began to take accountability for her actions. There were difficult conversations, moments of frustration, and instances where I questioned whether I made the right choice. But through it all, I reminded myself that I had taken control of my life. I had confronted the chaos, and I would continue to stand firm. As we began the arduous journey of rebuilding our relationship, I learned something invaluable. Trust is hard-earned, but it can also be rebuilt piece by piece. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that I was no longer a passive participant in my life. I had chosen to fight for what I wanted, and I was prepared to face the future, whatever it might hold. The storm had passed, but the aftermath was still unfolding, and I was ready for it. Now, I had to decide how far I was willing to go to ensure our relationship was truly mended. It was time to confront the final chapter of this tumultuous saga. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and I navigated the rocky terrain of rebuilding trust. It wasn't easy. There were days filled with awkward silences, emotional confrontations, and lingering doubts. But there were also moments of connection, laughter, and a renewed sense of understanding. I was cautiously optimistic, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still standing on shaky ground. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I glanced at Sarah. She seemed more at ease, a little less guarded. It was as if the weight of guilt was slowly lifting, and I could see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with. How are you feeling about everything? I asked, breaking the silence. She turned to me, her eyes softening. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand how deeply I hurt you. I never intended for things to go that far, but I let myself get swept up in it. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I want and who I want to be. I nodded, absorbing her words. It's a long road, Sarah. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. I need to see consistent effort from you. It's not just about saying the right things. I know, she replied, her voice earnest. I want to prove to you that I can be better, that I can be the partner you deserve. I'm committed to working on myself and our marriage." As she spoke, I felt a mix of hope and skepticism. Could we really move past this? I had come to terms with my anger towards Jake, and while I still believed he was a catalyst for our problems, I knew Sarah had to be the one to change. But would it last? Or would the shadows of our past continue to haunt us? I Decision. Let's try to find a therapist, I suggested. Someone who can help us navigate this. I think it could be beneficial for both of us. Sarah's face lit up. I think that's a great idea. I want us to have a safe space to talk about everything. Over the following months, we began couples therapy. The sessions were intense, pushing us to confront painful truths about our relationship. We discussed not only the affair but also the underlying issues that had allowed it to happen. We learned about communication, vulnerability, and accountability. It was tough work, but slowly we began to understand each other on a deeper level. Through therapy, we also established boundaries. We agreed to check in with each other regularly about our feelings, ensuring we were both comfortable with how things were progressing. It became a cornerstone of our renewed relationship, allowing us to voice our concerns before they festered into resentment. As time went on, I noticed genuine changes in Sarah. She was more open about her feelings, less defensive, and willing to communicate without the fear of judgment. She sought out activities to do together, reigniting the spark that had dimmed between us. We laughed more, shared more, and slowly began to rebuild the foundation of our marriage. One day, during a quiet moment in the park, I turned to her. "I feel like we're starting to heal. I know it's still a process, but it's nice to feel like we're really working on this together." She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "I've missed this us. I promise to keep putting in the effort, Mike. You're worth it." Her words echoed in my mind, and I felt a sense of peace settle within me. While I was still wary, I was beginning to believe we could emerge from this stronger. The journey wasn't over, but we were on the right path. As the weeks continued to pass, we found ourselves exploring new hobbies together. We took dance classes, went hiking, and even started cooking meals as a team. It was as if we were rediscovering each other, peeling back the layers of hurt to reveal the love that had always been there, waiting to be reignited. But I also knew that the past could resurface at any moment. I had to remain vigilant, not out of a desire to control, but to ensure I was taking care of myself. I began journaling my thoughts and feelings to track my progress, keeping a record of my emotional journey. I wanted to hold myself accountable, and in doing so, I found clarity in my feelings. One evening, after a particularly fun date night, we sat on the couch, sipping wine and reflecting on how far we had come. I turned to Sarah, my heart full. "I can see how much you've changed, and I've changed too. We're stronger than we were before, aren't we?" She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Yes, we are. I'm so grateful for the chance to make things right. I know I hurt you deeply, but I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much I love you." I felt a rush of emotions, gratitude, love, and a hint of caution. "Let's keep working on this," I said. "Let's keep communicating and growing together. I think we can truly make it. We owe it to ourselves." In that moment, I realized that while the storm had shaken the foundation of our relationship, it had also paved the way for growth. Sarah and I had faced what felt insurmountable, and we were learning to navigate the complexities of love together. Life isn't always smooth sailing. There will always be challenges and storms to weather, but now I knew that we could face them together. As I looked into Sarah's eyes, I felt renewed hope, not just for our marriage but for the future that lay ahead. We embraced, and I held her close, thankful that I had chosen to fight for us. In the end, I learned that love requires effort, vulnerability, and sometimes even the strength to endure the worst to find the best. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing that together we could weather any storm.